This is Gemara Baba Basra Daf Samoch Dalid, and we're holding on Samoch Dalid Amar Aleph, 4 lines from the top as we wrap up the previous sugya, heading towards the Mishnah. 3 lines from the top. Amalei Ravina the Ravashi. Ravina says to Ravashi, which will be a kasha against Rav Dimi from yesterday, Tashima Amar Reish Lakish Leisei Meretz. Says Reish Lakish, the Brisa teaches as follows. So and sells a house to his friend with the following stipulation, that the Dutel Yaina, the fence, the rooftop, is mine. What's the halacha? Dutel Yaina Shalai. V'amrinan. And we said, and we asked, this goes back to yesterday's Amar Aleph, Lamay El what relevance is it that the Yutel Yaina he retains? And we have a machlekes. Rav Zvira Amar, Shemrat Salot Zizin Maitzi, you could have Zizin beams protruding off the roof. Rav Papa Amar, Shemrat Livnos Aliyah Al Gaba Baina, you could build another floor on top of it. So says the Gemara, based on Rav Papa, brings the Gemara Raya, Keneged Rav Dimi, V'is Al Gedait. And if you're going to say like Rav Dimi suggests, Bistama Loikani, that Mistama, there is not a kinyan, you do not acquire the airspace on top of a house, then Lamali, what is the reason? Alminas, what does this extra stipulation do for you? According to Rav Papa, what this does is it gives you the area on top of the roof. But Rav Dimi says it's not, that the area above the house is not automatically included, and the seller keeps it. So what would it? Why does he have to stipulate almanas shedyuta al yoina shali? Says the Gemara. You know what it helps for? Ahani le almanas, that what enough al hadar bani le. No, a different nekuda, says the Gemara, that if the house falls hadar bani le, if the roof collapses, that he's able to rebuild it. Then Rav Papa says that in right to live nice aliyah al gabi is allowed to. He's not referring to building the simple aliyah on top of it, but rather he's referring to rebuilding the roof itself. And now we move on to a new Mishnah, and the Mishnah is really a direct continuation, which are different items in which are or are not included in a sale. Says the Gemara, someone sells a bayis lois habar v'lois hados, that the pit of the house, the cistern of the house, is not included in the sale. Af alpi shekas le'om kavaruma. This is true. Even if he writes, I'm selling the depth, I'm selling the height of the house, lamaisa, the bar and the dos, is not included. Sarach likach leidarech. It says the Gemara that the meicher, if he wants, excuse me, to access his bar vidus, he owns it. But how does he get there? Because the buyer has the house. So he has to purchase rights to walk to his bar and dos to Rav Akiva. Chamim Mayrim no ain't sarach likach leidarech. But a Rav Akiva admits, says Rav Akiva, if he says chutz me'elu, then if he explicates explicitly that he's not selling the bar and the dos, then that stipulation, that statement of explicitly not selling the bar and dos, allows him to have the rights, the derech, to get it. Says the Gemara Mishnah. Now, what happens if someone just sells the bar and dos? Just sells my pit or cistern of Kiva Imer. That including the sale is the bar and dos. No, sarech likach loi derek. So our Mishnah discussing the rights that one has to the bar and the dos if he sells a house, and the rights that the buyer has if he just buys a bar and dos. Says the Gemara, Yosef Ravina v'kakashalei. Ravina was sitting And Ravina was pondering the following. Hainu bar, hainu dos. They're both the same thing. A bar and a dos is a pit, a cistern, a reservoir. Says Ravina, I don't understand. Why did the Mishnah have to write both? A bar and a dos. So Amle Rava Teisva Ravina. So Rava Teisva says to Ravina, Tashema. Titani learned in a brisa, Charabar v'charados bekarka. Says the brisa. It's true. A bar, a dos are both in ground, but there's a fine nuance of a difference, says the brisa. Shabar bechfira, vados bebinyin. A bar is dug underneath, and a chafira is a dos, is reinforced with a binyan with stones around it. So says the Gemara. Now we can understand why both had to be listed, because the Mefarshim, the Rashbam here explains, because Lemaisa, Chafira is more house-like. A dos, is more house-like. Yes, it's dug underneath, but it has stones around it. So you would think maybe it is included. Says the Mishnah, no. Yos Ravashi v'kakashale. Now Ravashi is wondering, Hainu bar, hainu dos? Amne Markshisha Breder Rav Chisda Ravashi Tashema Detanya Chlabar Vechlados Bekarka Shbar Vechvir Vados Bebinyan, the same teretz. Continues the Gemara, quoting from our Mishnah. So if I sell you my house, I retain the rights to my bar and dos, but if I want to go inside, I have to purchase a derech from you. Says the Gemara, what exactly is the machlekes? My love, wakamifli. Then the machlekes Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim is as follows. As we turn over to Samach Talid Amid Beis, says the Gemara that what? Dear Rabbi Akiva Savar. Rabbi Akiva holds a very broad term. Rabbi Akiva holds what? Moicher ba'ayin yafeh moicher. And the Rabbanan hold what? Moicher ba'ayin ra moicher. Says the Gemara, the underpinnings of the machlekes in our Mishnah as to whether you have to purchase a derech to go to your bar and dos suggests the Gemara is that the crux is whether when someone sells something, does usually sell generously or not. And it adds on the Gemara, the Kamar Nami, Ba'alma Rav Akiva l'taimei. And truthfully, we found elsewhere that Rav Akiva says, according to his reasoning, Dam Moicher Ba'in Yafa, Moicher Mei Hacha. That elsewhere in Shas, that when we find Rav Akiva being of the opinion that Moicher Ba'in Yafa, Moicher, says the Gemara, you know where that Rabbi Akiva comes from? Right over here. Baba Basra Samachtalit is the Makar. That what? Moicher Ba'in Yafa, Moicher. As Rabbi Akiva says, you're selling everything aside from the actual bar and dos, and therefore you need to purchase the rights to access your own bar and dos. Says the Gemara, Mimai, 3 lines on the white lines. How do you know this is the machlekes? Dilma, perhaps it's a different machlekes. Maybe Rabbi Akiva Savar. Ein Adam writes a sheet in Ma'isavi Jersu Acherim. Maybe it's not a very broad machlekes as to whether it's ayin yaf or ayin ra, you sell generously or not. Maybe it's a different nekuda, suggests the Gemara. Maybe you know where Rabbi Akiva comes from. A person doesn't want that if I'm spending money, I'm going to spend cash and someone else is going to trot on my land. I buy a house. So it's true. You retain the rights to your pit and cistern. But I don't want you walking in my house. And Rabban and Savri, and they argue that no. That what? Sheita mais v'yifrach ba'avir. That the Rabbanan hold what? That one does not want to have to go and fly through the air. And therefore, the seller has a good taina. It's true that you, the buyer, might not want me in your property. But the fact that I don't sell the bar and dos with the sale allows me to come along and say, I need to get there as well. So says the Gemara, how do you know that the machlekes Rav Akiva and the Chachamim is whether it's Moicher Ba'in Yafa Moicher or not? Maybe it's a different machlekes. Maybe it's a machlekes as to whether the taina of the Moicher or the Lekech is stronger. Says the Gemara, fine, Velami Seifa, you know we're going to learn it from? The end of the Mishnah. What's the end of the Mishnah say? Machar Nacher. The end of the Mishnah say, said that what happens if you sell just the bar and dos? La'acher Rav Kiva Omer Eino Sharlik Loy Derech. Kiva holds you do not have to purchase a road to get to there. The buyer buys a bar and dos, it comes together with it. The path, Chamayim Sarech, that you need to come and buy the path. So says the Gemara, so what's the machlekes? Whether you meicher bayin yafeh? Rav Kiva says yes, and therefore when he buys the bar and dos, he gets the path in well, and the Chum say no. Says the Gemara, maybe that's not the machlekes. Delma b'hai pligi. Perhaps they're arguing about the following. The Rav Kiva, Savar Rav Kiva holds. Basra taita de loikeach aslinon. Rav Kiva holds. We go after the das of the loikeach. Rabbanan Savri Basra taita de meicher aslinon. And the Rabbanan, oh no, we go to Basra the das of the meicher. According to Rav Kiva, we go by the loikeach, and he feels if I buy a parador, of course I got a path. Rav Kiva says no. We go by the meicher. If I sold it to you, then of course I didn't sell you the path. Excuse me, I said it backwards. One more time. Rav Kiva says you don't have to purchase the path when you get the bar and the dus. Why? Because you go by the lakeach. You bought it, you get it. Rabbanan say you have to purchase the path. Why? Because I never intended to sell it to you. So says Gemara, you're right. Let's bring a different source as to this root machlekes of Kiva the Chachamim, whether you sell by in Yafa or by in Ra. Says a Mishnah in a week's time on Daf Ayin Aleph. Says the Mishnah over there, lo yisabar v'lo yisagas. The Mishnah over there says that if I sell to a field and I don't include what's sold in the field, similar to our Mishnah saying you sell a house, over there it's you sell a field. So it says the Mishnah over there that when you sell a field, lo yisabar v'lo yisagas, lo yisashevach. The pit, the wine press, the dove, the area for the birds is not included in the sale. Bein charavin, bein yeshuvin, whether or not these items are in use currently or not, and meaning the seller retains these items, but the seller has to buy back the path. So says the Gemara, Hasu Lamali. This exact same machlekes our Mishnah. Elalav, you know why the Mishnah later on repeats mamish the same machlekes. Hakamash lander kivus hamerch bayin yafa mech rabbanan savar mecha bayin ra mecher. Says the Gemara, that's going to be the makar. Rejects this as well and says, no, I'll tell you the different reason. 6 lines from the bottom. No, each one teaches its own unique chedesh by a bayis and a sadu. Utsricha. Why? The Ashvinan bayis, excuse me, just our Mishnah. Misham the bayit niusa. The reason why we need a din in our Mishnah is why? It's because the buyer wants sneas. I don't want you walking through my house to go to your bar. Aval sadeh malay. But maybe when it comes to buying a field, it doesn't have that level of sneas required. And therefore, you could, yes, go to your shevach, your dovecoat, and your other areas that are not included in the sale. And on the flip side of Yashvin and Sada with Amisha the Kashle Davsha, when it comes to a field, the Davsha, the walk in the field, is harmful for the field. So maybe that's the reason why you can't get the path. So says the Gemara, we can learn from there as well. So finally, the Gemara concludes 4 lines to the bottom. Elami Seifa. The second part of that Mishnah over there in Daf Ayin Aleph says, Machon Acher, if you sell the Shevach, you sell these different areas to someone else in your field. Rav Kiva Omer Eino Tzarich L'Dev Chamim Tzarech. Hasu Lama Li Hainu Hach Alava Kamashlam Tekiva Sav Meicher Bayin Yafeh Meicher Rabbanan Sav Meicher Bayin Ra Meicher Shema Mina. That is the conclusive Mekar. Meicher Bayin Yafeh Meicher Bayin Ra comes from where? Not our Mishnah, from the Mishnah over there in Daf Ayin Aleph. Truth is, I shouldn't say not our Mishnah, because it's a little bit of a combination of both. You need to have both Mishnayos. It's the extra Mishnah. And that's what we learn out. Meicher, Rav Kiva says, Meicher sells Bayin Yafeh. Rabbanan says, Meicher sells Bayin Ra'ah.